days. Cathy Burke has been the Chief Executive Officer for the Hunger Project Australia for 13 years. Prior to working at the Hunger Project, she worked in politics in a range of capabilities, including co-campaign manager for a WA Federal Senate campaign, lobbyist and policy strategist. That's just a little of what has made up Cathy Burke's life. But Cathy, you're going to spend 15 minutes of your life now talking to us about the old problem and creative innovation equals new future, is what I have here. Does that match with your thoughts? Excellent. Please welcome Cathy Burke.
Yes, a woman lives and breathes on the stage. Hi everybody. I'm talking about bringing new thinking to an entrenched global issue, which is hunger and poverty. So I guess there's two main things following on from Michael Rennie's two things that I'd love to leave you with today. One is how amazing people are, and secondly, who hungry people, or people who live in the conditions of hunger, really are. So the first thing is about how amazing people are. Like, we clearly here are amazing, and we've heard a lot about creativity, and I think after the last few days we understand that it's not just a function of a few sort of geeks in a lab, but there is an innate creative potential that we all share. And this is equally true for people that live in conditions of chronic hunger, but we don't often see them in that way. And one of the profound understandings that I've had in the years that I've been working in this area is the principle of interconnectedness. I think we understand, at least with interconnectedness, the whole theory of the butterfly flaps its wings here and then, you know, a typhoon happens there, that somehow what we do and how we are affects each other. But one of my profound realisations has been not only do we affect each other, but at a very deep level we are each other. And we don't often think or design our strategies or global responses from that very basic truth, that we are each other. So for instance, if I'm in a village in India and I'm in a hut and I'm talking to a woman who's holding a baby that she's given birth to that won't live, I am her and she is me. And probably harder to understand is that if I'm in a village, say in Bangladesh, and there's a man who keeps in his little hut some acid, battery acid on the floor, just as even if he never uses it to throw on his wife or his daughter's faces to keep her in line, it's there as a control mechanism. But I also am him. So when we start to think about interconnectedness and being each other and approaching this in a global way, we find that different solutions are available to us that we perhaps don't have when we separate ourselves from each other and see somebody else as another and not us, and somehow less than who we are. So the second thing is really, who are hungry people who live in conditions of hunger? They certainly work the hardest out of anyone in the planet, and I'm sure many people here have spent time in Asia or Africa and have just seen that rickshaw driver who works for 18 hours a day but still won't make enough to feed himself or his family. But often we see hungry people as somehow this bundle of needs. And I know when I first got involved in the issue, I used to work for a senator, and she actually told me about sort of being involved in ending world hunger, and I thought, oh my God, that just seemed just too crazy and too hard. I was thinking 1 billion mouths to feed, like how the hell do we do that? And even in the back there someone said, is it about feeding people, is it about food? That's sort of where we go, these sort of gawping mouths. Or we think of somehow these people who are these victims, and terrible things happen and they live in these terrible situations, and they're this sort of bundle of needs that something needs to be done to, we need to sponsor them, we need to sort of do something to them. They're this sort of amorphous mass, which again, you just feel overwhelmed at it. You just think, oh my God, it's like I've got to somehow exert, or the world has to exert enough force on this mass to create some change. And I hope the United Nations, everyone kind of does it, because it's just... So this is part of the failure in thinking, because hungry people themselves as I said, are the most hardworking people on the planet. They just aren't able to produce what they need to feed themselves and their family. So the key, and they are actually the biggest energy resource to ending hunger. And the key then is, how do we unlock their creativity, their capacity, their entrepreneurialism, so that they themselves are not a billion mouths to feed, but we have a billion women and men engaged in creating the solutions for their own lives and their own family. And that's really what the work that I'm involved in, and what I'm going to give some examples about that today. So one of the first things about thinking is we think about the issue of hunger. So think hunger, do a lot of you immediately think of like a kid with a big belly and flies around their faces and that sort of stuff? That's certainly the image that a lot of people come to. But really this is, oh, the failure of the clicker. Oh, this is just how amazing people are. Sorry. Yay, not on top of my slides. This is actually a more, this is really what hunger is and looks like for the most part. And what's really important about this picture is that you have girls at the front who are working and the boys in the back who are playing. This also is another classic image of what chronic hunger looks like. And you can drive through villages and see this, and you might think, oh, that's, looks nice, or those kids playing. It's very hidden, it's very, it's not obvious. One of the things about hunger in Africa, so we looked at how come food production in Africa is going down. Well, actually, women grow 80 to 90% of Africa's food, yet they get less than 1% access to land, less than 10% access to credit, and less than 7% access to all the agricultural help. So when you think about it, the people who are actually producing Africa's food, the people who are producing 10% of Africa's food are getting 93% of all the agricultural help that's needed. And why focusing on women is so important is that there's a whole cycle of malnutrition that keeps hunger entrenched, which again is really hidden. So you can see here, girls are married young, often when they first hit puberty. 60% of them are pregnant within the first year. They give birth to underweight babies. They breastfeed them for a shorter time if they're girls, because they're wanting to fall pregnant with a boy. The girls eat last and least, and they're malnourished in adolescence, and then they're married off. And I got a real wake-up call once when I was in Bangladesh, and there was some families and really marrying their daughters off at 12 and 13. And because of the dowry system, they have it actually was an economic incentive. You paid, the girl's family had to pay less money to get her married if she was young and uneducated than if she was older and educated, because she's considered sort of less, the purchasing family, I guess, consider her to be less trouble. So that's how we sort of somehow think about hunger. I just want some examples of, around women. So yes, we understand that women are often the victims of terrible things that happen to them. But even to me, that's skewed. Women are the most women will do anything to feed their kids, and you give them this much of a gap and they'll be through it. And so one of the innovations that we've done is through microfinance. We're all understanding about microfinance, and when you give small amounts of loans to women primarily, they'll use that to create businesses and improve the lives of their family. One of the twists that we've been able to do in Africa is that not only do we lend to women, but we then train women who end up running and owning the local bank. So the money that was seed capital for them to start with their borrowings gets transferred into the community. Women have to sit exams through the banking institution of that country. Often they come from being illiterate from the beginning, and they end up running their own bank. And these are some, you can just see from their faces, these women from Malawi who are just totally stoked that they've got this banking certificate now that shows that they can run their own bank. So again, it's people that you think wouldn't normally be capable of doing this sort of thing. If you empower them, they're able to. This is another example here around lending to people with HIV/AIDS. As we all know, this is a really big problem in Africa. And often really no one lends money to someone with HIV/AIDS because, you know, they're going to die and they won't be able to pay their loan and that sort of stuff. And we thought, well, actually, one of the issues, the social issues, is people aren't wanting to go and get voluntary testing for whether they've got AIDS, because, you know, they don't want to know, because if they know, they won't be able to get loans, they won't be able to... and also, who wants to know? It's like genetic testing, and, you know, if I knew I had the cancer gene, do I really want to know? Well, you know, I don't know that I do want to know. So if you do know, don't tell me. Anyway, so we pioneered an initiative to lend to people with HIV/AIDS, and what we've found is incredible. This is some people here. They're holding their passbooks and also their antiretrovirals. They're coming forward to get... There's less stigma now, so people are starting to get tested. They're making decisions around what they want to do with their lives as a result of that decision. They're able to get loans, and they're then creating income opportunities, and they're accessing the drugs that can lead them with a longer life. So there's three elements to how do you create a kind of an environment of people's own creativity of running their own life to come forward. And there's three parts of this. One is around creating a shared vision, and certainly we heard about that this morning, that without a sense of... people who live in hunger are incredibly resigned. They feel God has deserted us. There is no future that is not just a continuation of the past. There isn't an understanding that I can create my own life. And in fact, when this whole concept is worked with them, people cry because they haven't had the space or the opportunity to envision their lives that isn't just an extension of the past. And this is an example of what it looks like. And we've trained up more than 300,000 volunteer leaders. They're all from the communities. It's not white people going in, sitting with people through a really profound process of what sort of village do we want, and what are our priorities, and what sort of vision do we have for our life here. It was great having Michael here this morning from McKinsey. McKinsey did an evaluation of our work in Uganda, and this whole process of shifting the mindset was the big takeaway, that they couldn't... We understand how in corporate life that's so important, but it hadn't really happened in a kind of a rolled out approach in a village setting. And their understanding was that after 10 years, people were going from strength to strength, 10 years on after these sorts of processes. So people create a vision for their life and move forward with it. This is some women in India. They're doing a visualisation process around leadership. In fact, I was at this session, and one of the visions that one of the women had was, which I found really moving, was her vision is through her leadership actions that she won't be woken in the night by women crying for help. And so these women are being trained as leaders. A lot of them are illiterate, and again, just because you're illiterate, it's about bringing forward people's own innate abilities. They draw, they create their strategies. So this is a picture actually of a village, and someone there in that her group could write, but she can't write, so she's got some using pictorial about where houses are, and this was actually, they were creating a sanitation project because they identified sanitation was one of the big issues. And up here, I'm very patchy with my photos. So up here is a picture of that these women have done of their entire village, and the red dots mark where the widows are, who aren't on the widow's pension, who need to get on there. There's other markings for people who aren't sending their kids to school, so that because people are stepping forward to take charge of their whole community. And this is an example of someone that I met called Rihanna. She lives in Bangladesh. She went through this whole process of, I guess, becoming human and becoming a person and someone who could have some say in the way that her life goes and her village goes. So she had no education. She was very poor, and she did the Vision, Commitment and Action workshop and some of the stuff that I've mentioned briefly. And she formed a self-help group. So what happened was about 20 women came together, and each time they cooked a meal, and it might just be one meal a day, they'd take out a fistful of rice and they'd put it to one side. And at the end of the week or the fortnight, all of these women would pull their rice and have like a thing of rice, and then that would then be taken to the market to be sold, and you'd get a few tucker, obviously not a lot, but some. And then it would be your turn to borrow or your turn to borrow, and they'd rotate it. And she borrowed, and she used her loans to buy some chickens. And she had these little chooks, and they had other chickens, and over time she ended up buying a little cow that she fatted and used for milk and stuff. So she became economically, she started to feel good, she started to take leadership roles in her community. She found out that her 10-year-old cousin was about to be married. And in the past, because that's quite common, and in the past it would have just been, what can I do? Feeling of resignation, or, well, that's just, that's what happens. But now understanding that we need, for us to have our village free from hunger, having girls married at that age won't get us to that goal. And she just thought, there's no way this girl is going to be married while I draw breath. And she gathered up some other women leaders that she'd been working with through the Hunger Project. She went to the family, and I actually met the family about a year later, and they were still bitching about the outcome, but she went to the family and said, you can't marry this girl. And they just said, suck it, we're going to marry her. And she thought, right. And so then she went to the imam, the religious leader, and said, there's a marriage happening down there, they're preparing the wedding feast, you can't have this happen. And the imam went down there and was like, oh, there's nothing happened. Anyway, and then she and about 10 women went to the police, who are not normally on the side of sort of social change and liberation, and they ended up getting the marriage stopped. So that's an example of that sort of feeling that you can make some changes in your life. And just the last thing I wanted to say was the third thing is around creating a space for people to think. There's so many unexamined assumptions that people have, and one of the things, the beauty of this work is bringing people together, so villagers, a lot of people who are illiterate, with someone from their own community, and actually having time to think about things that you don't normally think about. And AIDS is a classic example. So you can't just tell people, wear a condom, otherwise you'll die, because people were like, yeah, okay, I get that. And then they went back to their villages and they weren't wearing condoms. But in a space of really nutting out the issues, what came to light was, well, actually, we need to appease the spirit of death in our ancestors. And they had this whole understanding that, say I'm married and my husband dies, then the tribal elders bring to me a man, and that in 3 days I have to have sex with him. And after I've had sex with this random person, I need to eat something hot, and on behalf of this action I have appeased the spirit of death. And if I don't do that, people will just keep dying and dying. And so people are doing this in this whole area. And of course it helps spread AIDS, because my husband might have had AIDS, I might have it, and I'm passing it on. So there's a whole conversation about is this true or not? What things mean to be framed. Someone actually invented this. Is this thinking now consistent with our understanding of where we need to go as a community? Really sophisticated concepts. And this community then went away to think about what they wanted to do, and came back and said, well, we feel we need to appease the spirit of death. And the person leading it, who's from that country, was like, oh God. They said, and their innovative way through it was, when my husband dies, I have a married relative somewhere, and within 3 days they can come to my hut and they can have sex in the bed that I have sex in, and at the end of it, I'll cook a meal and they'll eat it, and on my behalf, they've had the sex and they've appeased the spirit of death. It was the most beautiful way of dealing with something that couldn't have been thought of in an office somewhere. It can only be thought of when you honour people with what's happening. So I'll finish up here with just with the thought, people are incredible, people are courageous, and that there is a liberation happening in our world. It's heartfelt, it's happening. the onus on us is to be part of that and to put our shoulder to the wheel to have people flourish and reach their potential. Thank you.
Thank you, Cathy. Thank you. Fantastic. Our next